Welcome back to Only True Horror, where every whisper hides a truth. Stay close, the next story might just keep you up tonight.
Dare to watch.
In 1998, the Miller family moved into a quiet countryside home in Hollow Creek, a house that had stood abandoned for nearly 40 years. Locals warned them about the whispers at night and the lights that never stayed off for long. On their first evening, as the sun sank behind the trees, Sarah Miller swore she saw a woman standing by the creek, watching the house, her face pale as moonlight, her eyes hollow, and her dress dripping wet, as if she had just risen from the dark waters. That night, after settling in, little Emily Miller woke to the sound of whispering coming from her bedroom wall. She thought her parents were talking downstairs, but the voices were soft, right behind her headboard. When she pressed her ear closer, the whispers stopped, replaced by slow, scratching sounds, like fingernails dragging through wood. Emily whispered, "Hello," and a cold voice whispered back, "Get out." The next morning, Sarah noticed damp stains spreading across the living room wall, strange shapes that seemed to form faces when the light hit just right. She tried to scrub them away, but the more she wiped, the clearer they became. Hollow eyes, open mouths, all staring back at her. Suddenly, water began dripping from the ceiling, cold, black water. When she looked up, a face was staring down at her through the soaked plaster, the same pale woman from the creek. That night, John Miller was awakened by heavy footsteps above their bedroom ceiling, slow, dragging steps pacing back and forth. He grabbed a flashlight and climbed the attic ladder, each creak echoing in the dark silence. The air was thick, cold. Dust swirled in his light beam. Then, behind an old trunk, something moved, a figure crouched in the shadows. When John aimed the light, he saw a woman's face staring at him, her eyes black and wide, her mouth stitched shut with thread. The next morning, John searched the attic again and found an old leather-bound diary covered in dust and dried mud. The name on the cover read Eleanor Harlow, 1957. Inside, the pages told of a woman who lived in the house who lost her daughter in the creek and went mad with grief. The last entry read, "She calls me from the water. I must join her." As John turned the page, a drop of water fell onto the diary, but the roof wasn't leaking anymore. That evening, Sarah was brushing her hair in front of the old hallway mirror when the reflection behind her began to change. The walls in the mirror looked darker, wetter. Then, a pale hand appeared on her shoulder, but when she turned, no one was there. Her reflection smiled back at her, even though she wasn't smiling. Slowly, the face in the mirror shifted. It was Eleanor's, eyes black, mouth dripping creek water, whispering, "Bring her back to me." Over the next few days, Emily began talking to someone who wasn't there. When Sarah asked who she was playing with, Emily smiled and said, "The lady from the creek. She says her little girl is lost." At night, they heard Emily whispering and laughing in her room. But when John peeked inside, Emily was sitting alone in the corner, her toys floating around her in a slow circle and muddy footprints leading from the window to her bed. Terrified, the Millers packed their bags before sunrise. John started the car, but the engine wouldn't start. Every door they opened slammed shut on its own. The windows fogged from the inside, words forming in dripping letters. "She's not leaving." Suddenly, Emily began screaming upstairs. They ran to her room and found her levitating above her bed, her eyes rolled white, whispering in two voices, hers and Eleanor's. Desperate, the Millers called Father Raymond from the nearby parish. The moment he stepped inside, the air turned cold and heavy. He whispered prayers under his breath, clutching his crucifix tight. In the attic, he found symbols carved into the beams, marks of a summoning ritual. He turned to John and said, "Eleanor didn't drown by accident. She tried to bring her daughter back," and something else answered. Then the crucifix in his hand snapped in two. That night, Father Raymond began the exorcism. Candles flickered wildly as the walls trembled and water poured from the ceiling like rain. Emily's body twisted on the floor, her voice echoing with a deep, guttural growl. "She belongs to the water." The priest shouted prayers louder, holding his Bible high. Suddenly, a dark, shapeless figure burst from Emily's body, crawling up the wall like smoke, forming the face of Eleanor, screaming as the room plunged into darkness. After the exorcism, the house fell silent. No more whispers, no more footsteps. The Millers believed it was over. They packed once again, relieved. But as Sarah tucked Emily into bed one last time, she noticed the girl humming, the same lullaby from Eleanor's diary. "Who taught you that song?" Sarah asked. Emily smiled softly and whispered, "Eleanor did. She said I can stay with her now." Behind them, the mirror flickered, showing two Emilys, one smiling, one dead pale. The next morning, the Millers left Hollow Creek behind. The house stood quiet as they drove away, sunlight breaking through the mist. But that night, in their new apartment miles away, John heard water dripping in the hallway. When he followed the sound, muddy footprints trailed across the floor, leading to Emily's room. She was sitting by the window, whispering softly into the dark. "She found me again, Daddy," she said. "She's outside, waiting by the creek." Weeks later, Emily awoke screaming. In the dimly lit room, a figure slowly emerged from the corner. Eleanor, pale and soaked, her black eyes fixed on the child. The air grew icy. The lights flickered. Objects levitated around her as she whispered in a voice that was both Emily's and her own, "You belong to the creek now." The parents tried to intervene, but the shadows moved faster than they could react, wrapping around them, dragging the warmth from the room. In desperation, the Millers contacted Dr. Lawson, a seasoned paranormal investigator. He arrived with cameras, EMF detectors, and salt lines, warning them that some spirits don't leave, they claim. As soon as he stepped inside, the temperature dropped sharply. The walls groaned. On the monitors, shadowy figures flitted across every corner. Then, Emily pointed to the ceiling. A pale hand reached down slowly, dripping water from an invisible ceiling, as Eleanor's whisper echoed, "You cannot stop me." Dr. Lawson prepared a containment ritual in the living room, laying salt in intricate circles and chanting protective incantations. The temperature plummeted. The walls bled water, forming ghostly faces. Eleanor appeared above Emily, suspended in midair, screaming in a voice that echoed through the house. The lights flickered violently as the circle glowed, and for a brief moment, the shadows seemed to hesitate, as if the ritual had slowed her. But her growl echoed, promising, "This isn't over." As Dr. Lawson continued the ritual, the house itself seemed alive. Doors slammed shut with deafening force, windows shattered, and water surged from the ceilings in sheets. Objects flew across the room, and the walls twisted as if breathing. Emily floated higher, screaming as Eleanor's face formed in every reflection, 1,000 eyes watching. Dr. Lawson shouted prayers, but the spirit hissed, "The creek will take you all," as the shadows lunged toward them. The combined prayers and ritual began to take effect. Eleanor's watery form screamed and thrashed, her black eyes wide with fury. Emily's body dropped gently into her parents' arms as the shadows recoiled. The walls trembled, then cracked, and water splashed backward as if being pulled into the abyss. For a fleeting moment, the apartment was silent, except for Eleanor's voice, fading but venomous. "This isn't the end, the creek remembers." Weeks later, the Millers tried to live normally. The apartment was quiet. Emily laughed, played, and slept peacefully. But Sarah noticed small things. Toys moved slightly when no one touched them. Shadows lingered in corners, and the faint scent of creek water filled the air at night. One evening, Emily whispered to her parents, "She's watching from the window." When they looked, no one was there, yet a shadow passed across the glass, impossibly fast, leaving them chilled to the bone. Months later, the Millers moved again, hoping to escape Hollow Creek's shadow. But one night, Emily woke screaming. In the darkness, the familiar pale figure of Eleanor appeared at the foot of her bed, dripping water, eyes black as night. She whispered with a venomous calm, "You can run, but the creek never forgets." The lights flickered and went out, and in that darkness, the family realized some spirits don't just haunt houses, they haunt hearts. If you thought this story was terrifying, remember, the world is full of real horrors that don't make it to the movies. For more spine-chilling true stories, shocking hauntings, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe to Only True Horror and hit the notification bell. Enter a world where the terrifying is real, and it's waiting for you.